The Council War archives held many secrets, but few were as unsettling as the records on humanity. Their rapid rise, their unorthodox strategies, and most of all, their impossible technology had left the Galactic Council in a state of constant unease. Across thousands of pages and countless holovids, the same warning echoed: do not underestimate them. Yet, time and time again, the galaxy had failed to listen. And when the war came, it was already too late. It began with a single anomaly. Council scouts patrolling the neutral sectors had detected something unusual: ships vanishing and reappearing in impossible locations, moving in ways that defied the known laws of physics. At first, it was dismissed as sensor malfunctions, then as advanced stealth tactics. But as the pattern repeated, High Command realized the unsettling truth. The humans had developed a new method of travel. One that made the Council's most advanced warships look like relics from a forgotten age. The first real proof came when the Fourth Fleet, one of the Council's strongest battlegroups, encountered a small human convoy near the rim-ward expanse. The engagement should have been routine. The humans were outnumbered 10-1, with no escape route in sight. Yet, just as the Council fleet moved in for the kill, the human ships flickered and then they were gone. No hyperspace signature, no jump drive activation, nothing. One moment, the fleet had them surrounded, and the next, they were halfway across the system, accelerating towards safety. Admiral Velker, a hardened veteran of countless skirmishes, had watched the impossible unfold from his command chair. He had spent decades perfecting strategies against every known form of warfare. Yet nothing in his experience prepared him for this. The humans had done something that should not be possible. And worse, they had done it effortlessly. Within hours, the Council's highest military leaders were reviewing the battle logs, searching for an answer. Theories were proposed and discarded just as quickly. Some believed the humans had found a way to manipulate quantum tunneling. Others suspected an advanced form of warp technology. But one conclusion was inescapable: if the humans could move their fleets like this at will, the war was already lost. Desperate for answers, the Council sent an elite task force to capture a human vessel intact. The mission was simple: disable a ship before it could escape and extract any data related to its movement systems. But simplicity, as the Council would soon learn, meant nothing against humanity. The ambush took place near the Kelran Corridor, a known trade route where human ships frequently passed. The Council fleet, numbering over 50 warships, positioned themselves along the path, blocking every known escape vector. The moment a lone human frigate entered the trap, the Council ships sprang into action, weapons locking onto their target. This time, there would be no chance to flee. Or so they thought. The human ship hesitated for less than a second before vanishing. Not jumping. Not accelerating. Just disappearing. And then, in an instant, it was behind the lead Council destroyer. Before anyone could react, the human ship unleashed a precise volley of fire, crippling the Council flagship's engines in a single strike. The remaining warships scrambled to reposition, but by then, the human frigate was already gone again, appearing and disappearing like a phantom. In under 3 minutes, the task force was in shambles. Half of the fleet was disabled. The rest were forced to retreat. And the human vessel? Untouched. Word spread through the Council ranks like wildfire. The humans had mastered space-fold technology. Not mere teleportation, not standard faster-than-light travel, but something far more dangerous: instantaneous repositioning. It defied every principle of known physics, bypassed every defense, and rendered conventional strategies obsolete. A fleet using this technology could appear anywhere, strike with precision, and vanish before retaliation was even possible. No supply lines, no predictable movements, no weak points to exploit. Panic gripped the Council. Their war doctrine had been built on the assumption that movement had limits, that time was a factor in every engagement. Now, those limits were gone. The humans had rewritten the rules of warfare. And they weren't even trying to hide it. Reports from border skirmishes painted an increasingly grim picture. Council fleets would launch attacks on human-held worlds, only to find themselves surrounded by reinforcements that hadn't been anywhere near the battle. Assault forces would attempt planetary landings, only to be met by defenses that had seemingly appeared out of thin air. Even the Council's intelligence divisions, once confident in their ability to predict human movements, were suddenly blind. Desperation led to drastic measures. The Council formed a high-risk infiltration unit tasked with obtaining human technology at any cost. A select group of operatives, highly trained in espionage and sabotage, were sent to infiltrate a research facility deep within human space. Their mission was clear: retrieve any data on the space-fold technology and, if possible, bring back a working prototype. They never returned. The last transmission from the team was a single, chilling message: "They know we're here." And then silence. For the first time in its history, the Council was facing an enemy it couldn't predict, couldn't counter, and couldn't outmaneuver. War simulations were run endlessly, each one ending the same way, with total defeat. The Council's greatest minds struggled to develop countermeasures, but every solution was rendered useless by a simple, undeniable truth. The humans weren't just using space-fold technology. They had perfected it. And now, the only question left was this: what would they do next? The Council had faced many enemies before, but none like this. Every war in recorded history had followed a pattern: territories taken and lost, fleets clashing in predictable battles, supply lines stretched and severed. But this war? This was something else. The humans had turned it into a game of shadows, striking without warning and vanishing before anyone could react. It was a nightmare the Council's high command couldn't wake from, and worse, there was no way to understand the rules. Meetings dragged on for days as frustrated commanders argued over theories. Some believed the humans had developed an advanced cloaking system, while others insisted it was a refined jump drive. A few even whispered the impossible: that the humans had unlocked something beyond science itself, bending space in ways that shouldn't be real. But speculation wasn't enough. The Council needed proof. They needed a plan. And most of all, they needed time, something the humans refused to give them. The attacks weren't just on the battlefield anymore. Council supply depots deep in secure space were hit, entire convoys disappearing without a trace. Communications relays were severed, leaving entire fleets stranded without orders. No matter how well guarded a system was, no matter how many defenses were in place, the humans would appear. Not through hyperspace lanes, not through detectable wormholes. Just appear. And by the time the alarms sounded, it was already too late. Admiral Velker sat in silence as he studied the latest battle reports. The losses were staggering. More ships lost in a month than in the last decade of conflicts combined. Fleets that should have been invincible reduced to smoldering wreckage. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. Panic would accomplish nothing. If he wanted answers, he would have to find them himself. His request was denied at first. High Command didn't want him anywhere near the front lines, not when he was one of the few remaining strategists with a clear mind. But Velker was done watching from a distance. He needed to see it with his own eyes to witness what these humans had truly become. His fleet, hand-picked and battle-hardened, moved cautiously through the Hellion expanse, a contested region where human forces had been most active. It was a high-risk mission. No reinforcements. No backup. If something went wrong, there would be no escape. But Velker had made his choice. If humanity's space-fold technology was real, he needed to witness it firsthand. For 2 days, there was nothing. His fleet patrolled empty space, scanning for any sign of movement. Just as frustration began to settle in, the alert sounded. Unidentified ships detected on the far edge of the system. Small. Fast. Human. Velker leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. This was it. The moment of truth. Lock onto them, he ordered. Don't give them room to run. The fleet shifted into position, warships forming an unbreakable wall. Energy barriers powered up, weapons primed. The human ships were outnumbered, outgunned. There was no escape. For a moment, the small fleet drifted in silence, as if considering its options. And then, just as before, they disappeared. No warning. No flash of light. One moment they were there, the next they weren't. Velka's hands tightened into fists. He expected them to reappear somewhere else, to strike from an unexpected angle. But nothing happened. The space remained empty. No counterattack. No sudden ambush. Just the quiet hum of his own fleet's systems. Then, his ship's lights flickered. A chill ran down his spine. Status report, he snapped. The bridge crew scrambled, checking systems, running diagnostics. Then came the realization this wasn't an attack. No weapons had been fired, no ships had been destroyed. But something had changed. Velka could feel it. Then the first officer turned pale and stiff. Sir, we're not where we were. Velka froze. That wasn't possible. He had been watching the NAV screens the entire time. They hadn't moved. There was no jump, no acceleration. And yet, when he looked out the viewport, the stars were wrong. This wasn't the same sector of space. They had been moved. Not by their own engines. Not by an external force. Something else had pulled them from one location to another without them even realizing. Velka's mind raced. The humans hadn't just mastered space folding. They had found a way to use it as a weapon. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel. Fear. If the humans could move entire fleets at will, then there was no war to be won. There was only survival. And even that was slipping away. Back on the Council's capital world, the news of Velka's disappearance sent shockwaves through the government. No distress call, no wreckage, no explanation. Just silence. High Command was paralyzed, uncertain whether to escalate the war or seek peace. But the humans made the choice for them. One by one, Council strongholds across the galaxy fell silent. Not from battles, not from overwhelming force, but from simple, unexplainable absence. Fleets stationed in key defense positions vanished overnight. Entire planets lost contact with their governing officials, leaving entire sectors unguarded. The message was clear. The war was already over. The Council just hadn't realized it yet. The silence across the Council's territories grew more unsettling with each passing day. Reports of missing fleets, abandoned space stations, and vanished colonies filled every intelligence briefing. It wasn't just a war anymore, it was an unraveling. The humans weren't fighting in the way the Council had prepared for. There were no massive battles, no grand offensives. Instead, the conflict had become a slow, creeping collapse, like the universe itself was being rewritten one sector at a time. In the heart of the Council's war chambers, leaders sat frozen in disbelief. Every defensive plan had failed. Every counteroffensive had been rendered meaningless. Some worlds were lost without a single explosion. One moment they were fully operational, the next their transmission ceased, as if they had never existed. Panic set in among the highest ranks. The human space-fold technology was no longer a theory, no longer a mystery, it was now a weapon beyond comprehension. Yet, even as uncertainty spread, some refused to surrender to fear. Deep in a classified research facility on the remote world of Zalva 4, a group of scientists worked tirelessly to uncover the truth behind the humans' impossible abilities. They had analyzed every data fragment, every sensor reading from previous battles, searching for a weakness. If the humans could bend space at will, there had to be a pattern, something the Council could exploit. Dr. Luran, a veteran physicist and one of the last experts the Council trusted, stood before a holographic map filled with distortions. The data made no sense. Human ships weren't just teleporting randomly, they were phasing in and out of known space in a way that defied every established law of physics. It was as if they had access to another layer of reality, one the Council's technology couldn't even detect, let alone counter. As he analyzed one particular battle, something caught his eye. A deviation. A flicker in space before a human fleet had appeared. It was faint, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. A signature, a microscopic shift in gravitational forces. If they could predict these fluctuations, they might have a chance to detect an incoming attack before it happened. The information was immediately sent to the Council's remaining fleet commanders. If they could anticipate where the humans would strike next, maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. A trap was set. The last remaining stronghold in the Koran system, a heavily fortified sector with planetary defenses and one of the Council's most advanced war fleets, would serve as the battleground. If the humans appeared, if they engaged, the Council would have a fraction of a second to react. Tensions ran high as warships locked into formation, planetary defense grids activated, and thousands of soldiers prepared for the inevitable. Every sensor was tuned to detect the gravitational flicker that Dr. Luran had discovered. And then it happened. A distortion? A shift in space, so brief that even the most advanced sensors struggled to process it. The humans were coming. Admiral Gorthan, one of the last remaining high-ranking military leaders, clenched his jaw as alarms blared. "All units, fire the moment they appear," he ordered. And then, as expected, the human fleet emerged. Dozens of ships, sleek and silent, materialized from nothing. But this time, the Council was ready. Missiles, plasma rounds, and energy beams erupted in a relentless barrage. The void lit up with fire and destruction as the Council's forces unloaded everything they had. Human ships were struck, explosions tearing through the darkness. The ambush had worked. At least, that's what they thought. But then the impossible happened. The damaged human ships flickered just for an instant. The wreckage, the fire, the debris, it was all wrong. And in that brief moment, as the Council forces continued their assault, the horrifying realization hit them. They hadn't hit real ships. The humans had folded not just their ships, but reality itself, projecting echoes of their fleet into the battle, while their real forces remained somewhere else. The entire trap had been meaningless. The true attack was happening elsewhere, in a place the Council couldn't even reach. Before anyone could react, communications cut out. Fleet sensors went dark. The stars themselves seemed to distort as the fabric of space shifted around them. And then the capital world, the heart of the Council, vanished. Not destroyed. Not invaded. Just gone. All that remained was silence. The silence that followed was absolute. The Council's strongest fleets, its greatest commanders, its vast empire, all of it had hinged on the battle at Koran, and now, none of it mattered. The capital world had vanished. Not destroyed, not occupied, but erased from known space. The remaining forces scrambled for answers, but there was nothing left to analyze. Every sensor reading came back the same, empty void, as if the planet had never existed at all. Admiral Gorthan stood on the bridge of his flagship, his mind refusing to accept what he had just witnessed. His officers worked frantically at their consoles, running every possible scan, but the results never changed. It wasn't just the capital world that was gone. Every ship, every station, every relay connected to it had disappeared without a trace. There was no wreckage, no energy signature, no gravitational shadow, just an expanse of nothing. Then, for the first time in the war, a message came through. It wasn't a transmission from surviving Council forces. It wasn't intercepted data or a distress call. It was a direct message broadcasted on all open frequencies. The voice was unmistakably human, calm and deliberate. "This war is over. Surrender now, and there will be no need for further demonstration. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Gorthan's officers stared at him, waiting for his command, but he said nothing. The implications were too vast, the situation too surreal. The Council had known humans were dangerous. They had known human technology was unpredictable. But this? This was something else entirely. Across the remaining Council territories, panic spread like wildfire. With no leadership, no central command, and no way to retaliate, entire fleets abandoned their posts. Some retreated into deep space, hoping to escape whatever force the humans had unleashed. Others attempted to re-establish order, only to find that chaos had already taken root. The Council's vast empire, built over millennia, was collapsing in a matter of hours. But then, something even stranger happened. As Council fleets scattered, reports started coming in from the outer colonies. Places that had been lost weeks ago, entire systems that had gone silent were suddenly back. Not destroyed, not occupied, but fully intact. Cities untouched, infrastructure operational, populations unharmed. It was as if they had never been attacked in the first place. Confusion turned to dread. What had the humans done? Had they moved those systems through space? Had they hidden them somehow? Or had the Council never truly understood what was happening from the beginning? And then, another message. You assumed we fought this war with weapons. That was your mistake. The meaning was clear. The humans hadn't been using their technology just to fight. They had been changing reality itself, reshaping the war to their own design. What the Council had perceived as a slow defeat had never been a battle at all, it had been a demonstration. Gorthan gritted his teeth, his hands clenched into fists. He had fought for decades, commanded fleets that had conquered entire sectors, but he had never faced anything like this. The enemy wasn't just stronger. They were rewriting the very rules of existence. And if that was true, then the war wasn't over. It had never truly begun. Because if the humans could decide which worlds existed and which didn't, then surrender wasn't an option. It was extinction. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had never allowed himself to feel. Fear. The weight of silence pressed down on the bridge of Gorthan's flagship. Every officer, every soldier who had once stood unshaken in the face of war, now held their breath. The message from the humans had left them paralyzed, but Gorthan knew hesitation meant death. He had to act. He had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim control before the Council's empire crumbled completely. He forced himself to speak, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Establish secure communication with any remaining Council fleets. We regroup at Sector Zalis. We will not fall without a fight. The officers moved, but their movements were sluggish, as if their bodies had yet to catch up with their minds. No one wanted to voice the thought lingering unspoken in the air. Fight with what? Against what? The humans had not just outgunned them, they had undone them. Then, another alert. Admiral, new readings incoming, a technician said, voice shaking. It's the capital. Gorthan's eyes snapped toward the main display. His breath caught in his throat. There it was. The capital world, restored as if it had never vanished. The starports, the cities, the endless networks of trade and governance, all back in place. But the sense of relief was brief. Something was wrong. The transmissions from the surface were filled with confusion. No one below seemed to realize anything had happened. The leadership, the citizens, even the soldiers, none of them knew the planet had been gone. To them, the war was still ongoing. They spoke of Council victories that had never happened, of enemy defeats that had never occurred. Gorthan's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. The humans hadn't just erased a world, they had rewritten its history. Then, the final message arrived. You asked if we fight with weapons? We don't. We fight with time. Gorthon felt the cold grip of realization sink into his chest. This war had never been about battles or fleets. The humans had been waging a different kind of war, a war fought beyond the limits of perception, beyond the boundaries of reality itself. They had changed outcomes before they even happened. The Council had lost before the first shot had been fired. But as he stared at the restored capital, at the fleet around him, at the soldiers who still thought victory was within reach, a final, more terrifying truth emerged. If the humans could rewrite time, if they could decide which moments remained and which were erased, how could he be sure that he himself was real? How could any of them? And in that moment, Gorthon understood. The war hadn't just been lost, it had never even begun. Gorthon stood frozen, his mind battling against a truth too vast to grasp. The capital had returned. The fleets were intact. The war still seemed real to those around him. But he knew now that it was all an illusion, an outcome carefully shaped by forces beyond his understanding. The humans had not won in the way he had expected. They had never needed to. They had simply chosen a future in which they had already prevailed. The officers on the bridge awaited his command, unaware of the magnitude of what had occurred. To them, nothing had changed. The Council still held its empire, its fleets still dominated the stars, and the war continued as they had always known it. But Gorthon could no longer trust any of it. The humans had rewritten time itself. What else had they altered? Had they changed his past? Had they planted this war in the Council's history only to erase it at will? Was this even real? The questions gnawed at him, but he forced his thoughts into order. He had spent his life fighting wars, believing in power, believing that control could be seized through strength. But what did strength mean when reality itself was in the hands of another? The humans had fought with time, reshaped history, and dictated the fate of empires without ever needing to engage in conventional battle. The Council had never stood a chance. A transmission blinked on his console, marked as priority. The humans. Again. He hesitated only for a moment before accepting. A familiar voice came through, calm as before. Admiral Gorthon. You understand now, don't you? His throat tightened. They were speaking to him directly, as if they knew what he had realized, as if they had been waiting for him to reach this conclusion on his own. What do you want? He asked, his voice quieter than he intended. What we have always wanted, the human voice replied. An end to war. We never desired conquest. We never needed destruction. We needed only to show you what was possible. That your choices were never yours to make. The words chilled him. The humans had never fought for victory. They had fought to prove a point that the Council's belief in dominance was meaningless in the face of a species that could control time itself. They hadn't needed to conquer. They had simply demonstrated that war, for them, was irrelevant. Gorthon gritted his teeth, grasping at the last shreds of his defiance. And what happens now? That is for you to decide, the voice said. We have already seen the outcome. He closed his eyes, his mind swimming in the enormity of it. If the humans had already shaped the future, then no decision he made truly mattered. And yet, they had left the choice to him. That meant something. It meant there was still something beyond their control. Or maybe they just wanted him to believe that. He turned to his officers, looking at them as if seeing them for the first time. They were waiting, loyal, unaware that their reality had been rewritten. He could tell them. He could try to explain what had happened. But what good would it do? If the humans had already decided the war was over, then nothing he said would change that. Gorthon took a slow breath and spoke at last. Stand down. All fleets. All forces. We withdraw from all human-claimed territories immediately. The officers stared at him in disbelief. Whispers rippled across the bridge, but no one dared question him outright. Sir? One finally asked, hesitant. This war is over, Gorthon said, steel returning to his voice. And it was never ours to win. The transmission line remained open. He knew the humans were listening, watching, waiting. He wondered what they thought of his decision, if they had always known this moment would come. Maybe to them, it had already happened countless times before. But as the Council fleets began their withdrawal, as messages of retreat spread through the fractured empire, Gorthon realized something. The war was over, but the fear would never leave him. Because no matter how much power the Council had once held, no matter how far their influence had stretched, they had never truly been in control. And if the humans could rewrite time, if they could alter reality at will, then they hadn't just ended this war. They had decided every war that would ever come.